Okay, so Mike, I have worked with you at 101 Ways for I think mm, 4 or 5 years, something like that. I've always very much enjoyed working with you. I've learned a lot working with you, and obviously now we are talking about fractional roles. But first, let's start off with who you are, what your background is. It's very interesting.
Thank you. Thanks, Sasha. So I'm Mike. I'm a product and technology leader. I started out back in the olden days with it being an engineer, working more on front end technology, so more like your HTML, your CSS, those sorts of things, and then gradually started moving back to server side. And then, from a very early point, I was very much more interested in what we were building and why we were building it rather than how we were building it. And that led me more towards agile delivery and more towards product management. So quite quickly, I started leading the team and then started working with the stakeholders, the business, on what they're trying to achieve this year, what their P&L looked like, and then trying to turn their objectives, their business objectives, trying to turn those into products that could then deliver those objectives. So was able to do that for a good few years. Worked on a fantastic website called NME.com, which was a great experience. Got to go to some of the benefits were going to music festivals and seeing experiences that you wouldn't normally experience. It was fantastic. So a lot of those good things, but it was a lot of really kind of understanding about analytics and data and creating hypotheses and test and learn and pivot, persevere, all those sorts of lean product approaches that I still subscribe to today. So I did that for quite a long time, and then moved into more kind of the analytics side of things. So headed up a analytics team, in fact, established an analytics team between UK and Bangalore. And again, worked with the board on, what is it you're trying to achieve? What questions are you trying to answer? Rather than just asking, what do you need? It was more, what questions do you need answer to? How quickly do you want decisions? Because a lot of people talk about wanting to have data, like immediate data, like fresh data, right? To the second. Whereas actually you only need that sort of data when you're making decisions at that particular moment in time. Whereas if you meet on a monthly basis, you meet on a monthly basis. So anyway, I'm going off a tangent here, but did a lot of work with analytics, set up an analytics team, created all the dashboards, started using things like R for predictive analytics. So started doing a bit of statistical analysis there. Then moved into a media agency where I was working with the likes of Activision, Blizzard, Vodafone, General Electric, and headed up their data and ad ops team. So did that for a couple of years, and then moved into 100 Ways, which is a tech consultancy. Was employee number 5, started quite early doors, was very much the reason why I enjoyed consulting was being able to take all that experience across product delivery and engineering, being able to build teams quickly, trying to build that culture of delivery and of being focused on working on the right things as opposed to just working on stuff. Always keen to make sure that we're tracking what we're doing and making sure that we're heading in the right direction for the client and for the customers, and really trying to make sure that the clients understood that there was a different way of doing things, maybe different ways of doing things that might be more effective. So I was there for 7 years, absolutely enjoyed it, thoroughly loved it, and I'm now turning my hand to fractional, being a fractional product and technology leader, let's say. And again, keen to make sure that I'm providing as many companies as possible with support and help to help them to achieve their outcomes faster. And that's in a nutshell what I'm aiming to do. Sasha, I've been working with you. as you've said, for the past 5 odd years.
Yeah.
Again, also thoroughly enjoyed working with you as well. And it's great to be doing this. And yeah, please could you introduce yourself as well, give us a bit of your background, and then we'll start talking about Fractional.
Sure. My life with technology, I guess, started when I was quite young. I had my mother's cousin worked for Logica as a programmer back in the late 70s and early 80s. And I was intrigued by them, and he said, "Oh, come around and play with them." And so I did that, got really into them. My parents bought me a ZX81, and then I moved to having a BBC Micro, um, and played around with that a lot. Really loved programming. And then I got a job as a very junior games programmer, working on Amigas, Commodore Amigas. So that was 68,000 assembler and C programming, which I really enjoyed. Then I kind of hit the kind of 18, 19-year-old period, which was the very late 80s, which was a great time to be a teenager in the UK. I very much enjoyed that. But then eventually I went to university, and when I did a degree in computer science, and then when I came out, the games industry was at a bit of a sink, and so I got a job at an insurance a company that provided software for insurance companies, doing C++. And I went on a Java course. Now I'd come across Java when it was Oak at university, and I really liked it. I went on a Java course, then became a Java programmer for the next for the next 10 years. I did some work for some microsystems, which is pretty cool. But I think towards the end of it, I was finding that I was building the same thing over and over again. It would be like and I went contracting quite early on in my career, just accidentally fell into it. Enjoyed the moving around, meeting new people, experiencing new workplaces. Spent quite a lot of time at Sky. Great team, amazing team at Sky. Some of those people have gone on to do some fantastic things. We built our own EJB server because the specs had come out, but nobody had provided a reference instance. So we built one of those, and learned very early on about stateful and stateless session beans, which people might chuckle about.
What's the EJB server? Sorry.
Sorry?
What's an EJB server?
And yeah, so Enterprise Java Bean server, which it's basically it's kind of like an object model database that you can pass over networks. You can pass objects. It was I mean, some were trying to sell hardware. You needed really good hardware for it to work. These days it would work very well, but back then a little bit ahead of its time, I think, in places. But yeah, so I ended up feeling like I was often building the kind of the same thing over again. And fortunately, I was at an organization that needed a new team lead. And my boss at the time, a guy called Bob Hammond, who's a fantastic leader, based in the US, he flew over and he asked me if I was ready to never write a line of production code again, which is one of the most important questions I've ever been asked. The answer was yes. It turned out that I have since written production code, but I could well have not. And actually, as a rule of thumb, I shouldn't. So then I did the sort of classic career ladder of team lead, engineering manager, head of engineering, the equivalent of a kind of VP of engineering, CTO, and consultant with 101 on and off. And I've also done what we would now call fractional CTO work and fractional technology leadership consulting, which I really enjoy. So yeah, so I think that's kind of my background. I mean, I guess, I've worked for some big names. I've worked for Amazon Prime. I've worked for Argos. I've worked for JP Morgan. I've worked for what was Deutsche Bank, and then I've worked for a number of startups that weren't successful, so no one will have ever heard of. Some that are kind of still growing. So I've done kind of both ends of the scale. Um, I like organizations that have just about enough money to achieve what they want to achieve without uh, taking massive no, well, not shortcuts, but because shortcuts are good, but without really having to compromise fully. So not big, but it is that question of having enough people so that they're not burning out, which
Yeah,
is very important to me.
nice. And what I quite like about both our backgrounds is the diversity
Yeah,
and varied and kind of depth of the experience. So,
yeah.
as
Well,
you mentioned a few companies that you'd worked with,
yeah,
I worked as well with like the likes of Argos, Sainsbury's,
yeah,
Tesco,
yeah,
Activision, Netflix,
yeah,
the list goes on. And I think when I last totted it up, it was around, you know, maybe 25 to 30 different companies across maybe 10 different industries. And I think that's, the fact that you've been across so many different industries and so many different clients, you've seen
yeah,
things that work in different scenarios.
yeah,
And
yeah.
not everything works in the same way.
No,
And one of the main things that's different across all organizations, I mean, it's the same thing, but it's different, is people, and being exposed to different people, different personalities. Each team has a different culture, let alone the organization itself. So that's just one of the things that I like about our backgrounds, is the fact that we've both worked across so many different organizations.
absolutely. I mean, obviously, you and I both worked at DAZN and Abcam. But I think, and actually, I think that realistically, you've done a lot more fractional work than I have, because although you worked for 101 Ways, effectively, you would have three, even four clients that you were working across in any given week, which is, quite a fractional model. So yeah, I think, I mean, it's you definitely have a lot of that experience. Um, I mean, and I've been doing that on and off, but not day in, day out for 7 years, like you have. Yeah. So yeah. So that's why I like talking to you, because you know what you're talking about.
Likewise.
We kind of talked about this word fractional. What does it mean, Mike? What is a fractional CTO, or a fractional principal engineer, or a fractional marketing executive?
Yeah, so that's the first thing just to say, is even though in our context it's more around technology, product engineering, however you want to phrase it, fractional works across any part of the boardroom, let's put it like that, whether it's finance, marketing, sales, anything like that. I think fractional leadership for me is an experienced individual, an experienced person who can go into an organization on a part-time basis, but have a full-time impact. And I think that for me is how you can summarize it into the smallest number of words. It's having the ownership and responsibility of a particular vertical. It's as in of an organization, helping bridge the gap between what's happening in the boardroom and what's happening on the ground, and making sure that teams are well supported, that teams understand why they're doing things, the rationale behind it, but also that the board understands how to work with the engineering team and with the product team, and making sure that there is alignment within the organization And I think the other thing as well is sometimes organizations, whether it's startup through to enterprise, they often have people within the organization who could be future leaders as well. And I think part of being that independent person and being that person with experience enables you to find those people and help to create those future leaders of the org,
Yeah.
especially if you are a part-time fractional person.
Yeah, because I was going to say all of that is very important, but that also, you mean, so most of that applies to a somebody in the C-suite, a CTO,
Yes.
and you don't have to be fractional. What then? What actually do you add by not being there 5 days a week?
So what I'm finding and what I found over the last, especially last couple of years, is that if I think back to maybe 10, 15 years ago, teams weren't very experienced, and teams needed someone with experience to help guide and show them and fill in those gaps, I suppose. Fast forward to now, a lot of those people are still in work. A lot of those people are still around, and there's a lot more experience in the market now, and a lot of those teams and organizations have gone from being quite inexperienced to very experienced. So what I've been finding is that teams don't need to be looked after in the same way as they used to. That the model a little while ago was required of having a full-time person there, 8 hours, 10 hours a day. And teams actually need more alignment, make sure they're working on the right things, that they're being given those objectives, that they are doing their best work. And I think that doesn't necessarily, given the right context and the right, given the right type of organization, having somebody in there 5 days a week actually doesn't necessarily empower the teams to do the work they need to do. And actually, by being there for 2 days a week or a
Yeah,
few hours a week, even just checking in and supporting and making sure actually means the team have got to stand on their own 2 feet, and they
yeah,
have to make their own decisions, and they have to do their best work. And also, as a fractional person, even though you might not be working, you know you're still contactable. You're
yeah.
still there to support. You're at the end of a phone, you're at the end of Slack, you're at the end of Teams, you're at the end of WhatsApp. You're still invested and you're still there to support. So that's one of the main things for me. What about you? What do you
Yeah.
think?
I definitely agree with all of that. And I think that, I mean, you make a really good point, which is that we talk a lot about trying to make teams autonomous. But then the danger is that they're autonomous with us breathing down their neck.
Yes.
And I think I think that's a really good point. I think also, definitely you sort of hinted at it, but I think there's an awful lot of, frankly, politics that you can avoid when you're a fractional CTO in my case, because you are there to do a job. You're being very much measured on fairly narrow focus, and you're not there to ensure that you get your share options. You're not there to ensure that you're getting your bonus. There is less value in trying to raise your own profile and amplify your own organizational power when effectively you're kind of a contractor, um, and that is valuable, and I think that can really help people who are nervous around having an extra person in the board meetings. they relax around you more. So I think that's very valuable. I also, at the other end of the scale, also there is the situation of organizations that can't afford, and perhaps at that point in their life cycle shouldn't afford, an expensive, very experienced technology leader.
Yeah.
But what they can do is they can bring one in 2 days a week, and they can get all of the I mean, not exactly necessarily strategy, but certainly there can be a lot of advice on operational work, and there can be a lot of high level thinking around strategy and working with the senior people in the organization on strategy, which doesn't go on enough in many organizations. I
Well, how
think
many, Sasha, how many organizations have you worked with where the CTO or the VPs or whomever have been so like knee deep in with the team that actually their ability to step back and focus on
very,
the
yeah, yeah.
organization,
Only the really good ones,
yeah,
actually, only really good ones. There was uh the CTO at Argos when I was there was very good, really, really good, and he was very strategic. Had a great relationship with product, and was very much a grown up in the room in any scenario. And he's very much the kind of person that I kind of look up to, and you have that thing of like, what would he do, or what would she do in that situation. But a lot of the time, I've seen CTOs who fall into the trap of being delivery people for the board, for the rest of the C-suite, and they kind of take their orders from rather than adding strategic business opportunity to an organization. And I
so
think that's very difficult sometimes when you're full time, because you become so involved in operational work.
and it's hard to get yourself out of it.
Very hard to get yourself out of it. Yes, very hard to get yourself out of it.
And I think
A lot of people move from being a head of technology or whatever into being a CTO role, and the relationship changes, but people are used to looking at you in one mode, and you actually have a very different job. That was there are two. I think there are two culture shocks in my career. One was going from being a individual contributor to being a team lead,
yeah.
and one is from going from whatever to CTO, because it's a very different. Having sticking that C in front of it means that you're talking to very different people all the
You
time. You're
don't
talking
get
to
tech,
VCs,
and you spent your whole career talking to people who get tech,
yeah,
and then suddenly you're in a room with very experienced people, but all they know is marketing, all they know is
yeah,
sales,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
is
absolutely. And
HR.
many of them, if you're not in a real tech company, and there are a lot of companies that call themselves tech companies that, in my opinion, aren't. But if you're in a real tech unless you're in a real tech company, they tend to look at you like a cost center and not a profit center.
Yes.
And that can be very very challenging, and you have to work hard, and you have to know you have to know what you're talking about to break that.
So is there a case then for, even if there is a having both a permanent CTO and
Yes,
a fractional person?
yeah, yeah, and I've done that a little bit, and I think that's um, you you're a backup, right? And you in my case, I've got a lot of experience because I was a developer for so long. I've got a lot of experience of what developers um, want and need, so I can look after that part of things, and look at the strategies, and understand what drives developers. So I think it's um, no two people are the same. as in any scenario, but there are some themes, again, as in any scenario, around the different types of motivations that developers work to. And I think some of those motivations are hard to really understand unless you've been in that sort of scenario.
Yeah.
Because many people are not particularly excited about the day job. Once in a while something exciting happens, but often certainly for junior developers, often is literally the most exciting thing is writing code, and people don't get that.
No.
And understanding the frustrations that are born from that, I think is very useful, and that means that one person can really focus on the strategic business side. You can back them up with your experience, and then also take care of some of the things. Give them some airspace.
Yeah, exactly. But then also support them on that journey of
Yeah,
making the transition from
yeah,
being that hands-on technology delivery person to
yeah,
being a person who can, that would enable us to step away
yeah,
and for them to take that other work on as
yeah,
well. Or then, not only you kind of helping that person elevate themselves up, you're also
yeah,
elevating that level beneath
yeah,
that person up
yeah,
as well. So
yeah,
that this is as the CTO in situ is advancing and is able to take that step,
yeah,
beneath him are also leveling up
yeah,
so that he can let go of some things and enable his team or her team
yeah,
to be able to do what they need to do as well.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think it's kind of soft coaching and mentoring
Yeah.
that's going on. It's not necessarily an official capacity, but it's also coaching by doing,
Yes.
and people seeing what good looks like.
Yeah. Like fractionals, we'll call them fractional, see things in a slightly different way. Again, because of the experience that they've got. So if
Yeah,
I think back to a client that you and I both worked on previously, seeing engineering, product, HR, all at odds with each other, all
yeah,
not
yeah.
really pulling together in the same direction. One of the things I did was get all of them in a room away from HQ,
I know
got them
exactly.
all in a room together,
Yeah,
and also brought in some really experienced product coaches who could bring them in and actually look at, right, what is it we're trying to do here?
yeah,
What's your motivation here? What's that person's motivation?
yeah,
Thinking about the organization, the stakeholders, the steerco,
yeah,
and what they're trying to achieve and why there's all these dysfunction and back channels and all these different things that are going on, and actually enable them to have conversation. They should be having these conversations day in, day out, but they just don't
yeah,
because everybody's in their silo and everybody's just focused on everybody was in survival mode.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
had to provide them, and I saw what was needed, and I gave them a safe space to be able to come together and have proper, honest conversations, which I think had an impact at the time. But
yeah,
then there was personnel changes and then stuff changed, and it could have done with another one, but the situation didn't really allow for it. But the point here is that we saw what was really going on.
yeah.
We
Yes.
we
Yeah,
helped them
I think
take
we
that
really
step
did.
back.
Yeah, yeah. And we weren't so uh deep into the weeds that.
No, we weren't that emotionally attached either. We
Yeah,
were able to we were able to
yeah,
stay impartial, and we
yeah,
were able to, like you mentioned earlier on, as
yeah,
a fractional, you're working towards an outcome,
yeah,
a very specific outcome that's in your contract,
yeah,
and that's what you're aiming towards. There
yeah,
isn't those politics that are there. There isn't those issues. You're literally trying to do what's best for the organization. And if
exactly.
that is actually trying to get people together to talk to actually impact wider change
Yeah,
for the better of the company, you do that.
yeah, 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 absolutely. Um, absolutely. And I think And I think I do think that there are two reasons for that. I think one is the fractional nature of it, and I also think that it's a lot of it is born of experience.
Yes.
Um, and there were a lot of good people in the organization who were doing the jobs for the first time, and they were very sort of confident, so it's very easy to forget that this was the first time that they were doing things.
Yeah.
But actually, that I think that we brought the voice of reason to reasonable people, if that
Yes.
makes sense.
That helps.
Yeah, yeah. The word fractional, we sort of talked about this offline earlier, but I mean, it is basically, it means part-time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
um,
but not taking away well, it is part-time, yeah.
yeah,
But it's being part-time, and like I said at the beginning, having that full-time impact,
yeah,
where
yeah,
you're balancing your C-level needs,
yeah,
the organization C-level needs with execution and delivery.
yeah,
So it's balancing those two things. But yes, effectively, you're doing that on a part-time basis,
yeah,
but you still have the same responsibilities. You have the same
yeah, yeah,
other
yeah,
bits and pieces that a
yeah.
full-time person would have.
So
And
could you? I mean, we're both fans of, um, for want of a better expression, the principal route. So that idea that developers should have a place to go, individual contributors should have a place to go after being senior without having to take on formal leadership roles. So, that's the staff engineer, the principal engineer. Um, I suppose in some organizations it moves towards um, architecture, things like that. Do you think that there's the same thing it can apply? Could you be a fractional staff engineer?
we need to be rethinking how we staff our teams
Yeah,
and how we approach delivering value to customers.
yeah,
Again, historically, I get the need to build teams. There's value there.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay. As in like organizational
Yeah,
value, funding, a lot of that can be based upon how many permanent staff you've got and so on
yeah,
and so forth, or investment or whatever else. So that's still very, very important. But at the same time, I think there's always this urge to, right, well, I need full-time people. I need to increase my headcount. Do you?
yeah,
Is there a hump you're trying to get over? Is there a lack of skill? Let's say you're wanting to move towards using a micro front end architecture, right?
yeah,
It'd be tempting to go, okay, right, well, we need to hire at least 2, 3 people into the org permanent to do that.
yeah,
Do you? You'll then end up potentially, if you don't handle it in the right way, you could end up with 2 or 3 single points of failure. So if they're poorly, if they decide to leave, so on and so forth, all that knowledge is mainly possibly in that one person.
yeah,
Whereas actually, if you brought in a really experienced person for 3 to 6 months and on a contract basis,
yeah,
and you're asking them to deliver XYZ with the team, but also part of the remit is to share knowledge and
yeah,
level up and
yeah,
bring the team along, so that after those 6 months you're no longer needed because the team is experienced in it and you know what that looks like.
mm,
So that's and I think that goes not just for engineering. I think the same could go with, say, product as well.
yeah,
A lot of product managers in lots of organizations haven't necessarily been trained in product.
no,
They
no,
they they've been, maybe they were a business analyst previously or a
yeah,
project manager or so on and so forth. I think there's bringing an experienced contract product manager to come in and actually show this is what good product is, and
yeah,
actually have some sessions with them, share some learning, or even just bring in a really experienced product coach. And I think there's
Yeah.
also the same with engineering coaches,
Yeah.
somebody
Absolutely.
in who
Yeah.
maybe just pairs for a couple of hours with
Yeah.
somebody, and it can just make such the biggest difference ever. So
Yeah.
I do think we need to rethink how we deliver against our objectives, I suppose. I'll put it like that. But
Yeah.
Sasha as well, I sorry, go on.
Well, I was just going to say that actually, I had a little bit of a light bulb moment, and it's an obvious join the dots, but having a principal engineer 2 or 3 days a week means that there are 2 or 3 days when they're not there. So there
100%.
has to be knowledge sharing. It
Yeah.
forces it, and it means that it happens immediately, because the common pattern is somebody, you have a contractor, they come in, they build something awesome for 6 months, and then that it's done, the work is done, and rather than going, okay, so can we extend you for another 2 months while you train everyone up? It's like goodbye. And also sometimes a lot of people don't necessarily want to be involved in that. But if it's from day one, then it's happening, right? So that's actually a very, very powerful. And again, that applies to any form of fractional work. Is that almost immediately anything that you need to share constantly.
Yeah. And
Um,
you're
which is
creating, and then
yeah,
you're establishing that within the team so that
yeah,
that then becomes natural once that person's gone.
yeah,
Um, how can OPEX and CAPEX be better utilized within an organization,
yeah,
actually optimize the
yeah,
spend
yeah.
and enable us to be able to staff teams in different and better ways?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and obviously, organizations who are looking either to raise money or to be bought or any, most of the time, companies don't are reluctant to increase their operational spend, because that's what appears as this is the running costs of the business. And to make the organizations attractive, you want to have that as small as possible. It's like a car, the running cost of this car or the petrol consumption of this car is very low. So people are like, oh, that's great. And that contractors can come out of capital expenditure, because they're not PAYE. And that can be that can mean that you don't have to slow down. You don't have to reduce your experience within the organization, because obviously the more experienced your people are, the more salary they get paid. Um, and you're retaining some very experienced people, and then you also have the same to some the same thing with share options. Is a lot of senior people joining an organization where they're not going to get paid a fortune, or organizations where they're going to get paid a fortune, but they're one of the big American style tech organizations expect shares, and contractors, fractional or otherwise, but fractional don't.
No,
In
people
fact,
use
they
their own
can't.
equipment.
Yeah,
People
they
are
bring their
doing
own
it as well.
equipment.
They do
Yeah,
their own training. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
There's a lot of savings actually
yeah,
to be had by bringing in
yeah,
using capex
yeah,
as a way to fund contractors.
yeah, yeah,
Um, Obviously, you can still use capex as well to pay for some of your perms as well,
yeah, yeah,
which is also handy to know. And I
yeah,
think the other area as well that is less well known, and in fact, this could probably be a talk in its own right, the capex opex funding,
yeah,
is the R&D tax credits. I
yes,
think not many organizations realize that there are these tax credits available, and that there are organizations out there that help you to recoup some of this. But I mean,
yeah,
I worked with a company, and I think I must have helped them get a refund of around 250 grand,
yeah,
which to a lot of to a lot of people, a lot of companies, that makes a big impact.
yeah,
And actually the ability to then reinvest that
exactly.
into your teams
Yeah,
makes a huge difference as well.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it is definitely a whole topic on itself, and perhaps one that we can spend some time on pretty quickly. But yeah, there are a lot of things that we don't take advantage of unless we've got great accountants. And that is what it is. But around the fractional stuff, it just gives you more fluidity and flexibility, which when you're growing rapidly, when you're trying to float, when you're trying to raise money, that's what you want. Is it's like it's kind of I hate to use the the A word, but it's very much a lowercase agile funding,
Yes,
and that's very important to small and mid-sized companies, which most companies are. So, why is fractional good for us? What's in it for us as human beings and people who love people and technology?
I think that's why, because we love people and technology. I think having being a fractional person working across 2 or 3 different clients enables us to have more of an impact across various different companies and different teams. I think it also, what's attractive for me is, I've always, like I kind of said at an early stage in my career, I cared more about why we were doing things. And once I understood the why, I was then able to deliver my best work. If I'm just told, oh, build this thing, change that button, do this thing for marketing needs to get done. Obviously, I do it, but the more context I understood, the better work that I did. I'd make better decisions as a result. And I still see a lot of organizations who still don't provide that context to their teams. And
Yeah.
I think all I'm looking for and all I'm wanting to achieve here is being able to help as many companies as possible and help as many people as possible. That's what I'm aiming for. What about you, Sasha?
Um, yeah, selfishly, I like meeting people. I like meeting new people. I like new scenarios. And you get that a lot. Um, at times I love the fact that I can be working, half a day a week for uh one vertical and half a day, not half a day, but half the week for one vertical and half a week for something completely different. Radically different. Also, I tend to find there's quite a lot of synchronicity. So uh, you you start digging into some technology you don't know. Again, I think this is a topic for possibly even more than one um, uh, conversation. But one of the reasons why technology is so difficult to predict is because most of the time you're doing it for the first time,
Mhm.
right? And you know your way around saws and hammers and nails and things, but how long would it take you to put up a set of folding shelves in the room behind you, right? It's that thing of, well, actually, I've not built that before, and I don't know exactly, even though I live here, I don't know exactly the size of the room, so I'd have to measure it. There's a whole load of stuff that you're doing for the first time. But actually, what I'm seeing is that um, I'm doing something for the first time, and then I'm doing it for a second time for someone else quite quickly because you get these themes. And it's got to the point now where I I kind of track technology, and I love technology, so I read about it. Um, I read about it in bed, um, uh, and I'm often ahead a little bit with these things. And you see these kind of patterns. One patterns. One thing that's come up fairly recently is two organizations I've been helping out with, slightly staggered, both looking at moving from NoSQL to SQL databases, which is, it's a very common thing, but it was strange how the two aligned so that it was quite fresh. It's been quite fresh in my mind.
It is quite funny how like everybody rushed to NoSQL and now they're kind of wanting to.
Yeah, and that's the way it should be, right? In some ways, because uh, you have there's a real friction point in organizations, which is we need to build this thing fast to be successful. Because if we don't build it fast, then we're going to run out of runway, or our competitors are going to overtake us. And NoSQL is often seen as a very fast way of creating effectively a database. So a lot of organizations did that. I think, again, another subject for a whole conversation, but I think one of the issues is that we often believe that if we're successful, we're going to get time to go to the CEO and say, hey, remember when we chatted 2 years ago and I said, look, we're going to use NoSQL to build this because it's going to take us 3 months instead of 6, and at this point that's going to make a lot of difference, but that eventually we probably need to move to SQL. Well, that moment has come, but in a lot of organizations that moment there's never a good time to do
Well,
it. So,
it's exactly, it's hard to convince a CEO that we should spend, a few months doing something in a different way when
yeah,
the CEO's there. Well, what value is that going to bring?
yeah, yeah.
And
I thought I already had this.
exactly, and it's more about what it unlocks and what that future value is. And even though yes, we're going to spend this time doing this, the rationale for doing it means that it's going to enable us to do X, Y, Z faster.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
again, it's somebody who hasn't done that stuff before.
No, exactly,
That's
exactly.
more difficult.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that a lot of certainly CTO work in early stages of organizations is figuring out what needs to be built well and what needs to be built fast,
Yes,
and that's hard.
and there is a difference.
And it's hard when the options on the table are all new, because we're always using new things, and a lot of the reasoning for using new things is, well, they're meant to be easier and they're meant to be faster, but actually, ironically, since we're doing it for the first time, probably get it wrong. So it might not be faster, it might not be cheaper, but it does enable you to hire people who are excited for using new technologies, and they tend to be a little bit more kind of proactive.
Yeah. And I think just what made me smile earlier on when you were talking about building a shelf behind me, you've never done it before, but the tools is, the tendency for people to go, well, let's put 9 people on it then.
Yeah,
And now all I'm thinking about now is, on the wall behind me,
yeah,
trying to get 9 people who've never built a shelf
yeah.
together. And now
So are you saying that 9 people couldn't build a shelf in a month?
I'm something along those lines. But that's the point though, is as experience again, we know
Yeah,
that actually you have 2 people doing it,
yeah,
and then they can share that knowledge as opposed to
yeah,
just trying to throw as many people on the
yeah,
same problem,
yeah,
because you end up, physically,
yeah,
people don't think about it physically, right? And all I'm
yeah.
thinking right now is you couldn't even fit 9 people in it,
No.
So even if you
Yes.
think about the code base
Yeah.
is a physical
Yeah.
space,
Yeah.
not physical, but it's like a physical
Yeah.
space. And
Yeah.
actually, you're going to be tripping over the code. You're going to be
Yeah.
messing around.
Yeah.
You're going to change something that somebody else has done,
Yeah.
and it's a mess.
Yeah.
So
And I've literally worked in organizations where, we've scaled rapidly and realized that we didn't have enough desks. So that physical issue.
it's easily.
Yeah, it is. It is. And actually, you know what? Get 2 people to build your shelves and have a master joiner stroke uh, carpenter come in once every couple of days to give advice on things, look at
Yeah,
the rest of the house, figure out
do the quality
um,
checks.
Yeah, who might know some really good suppliers who can give you top quality wood for less.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, that would be your fractional master craftsman. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. I don't know, it wasn't fractional, but the other day I learnt where the word journeyman comes from. Do you
Okay.
know? Do you know that? So like you have apprentices, and then you have journeyman, and then you have craftsmen as a kind of stages. So you know, back in the day, you apprenticed, and then you travelled around Europe doing jobs. So you were journeying from job to job,
Yeah.
and that's the kind of I suppose it's not fractional, but it's certainly the sort of short, sharp kind of thing. And that way you got lots of experience at lots of different places. So when you finally settled down, it wasn't this, you know, this town's experience of how to join you know, cupboards together. It was French, German, English, Scottish, you know, from all over Europe, and that's where the word journeyman comes from. So I was like, oh, okay, that's pretty awesome. That feels familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think we've covered quite a lot, and I think we've also hinted at lots of thoughts for other things and other times than we could have a conversation, which I hope we're going to do. And so I wonder if anyone who is watching this, really we want feedback, because this is an experiment, and you know, experiments are only valuable if you are able to measure and learn, and also give us ideas on what you want to hear about, from two old codgers who've been around for a little while, and know what they're doing. Well, sometimes.
Yeah.
Not when it comes to putting up shelves, as you can tell by mine. Um, but yeah,
Good. All right. Well, thanks, Sasha. It's been great. And yeah, add some comments and feedback.
yes, please. Thank you. Bye bye.
Cheers. Bye.